Welcome to the Real Estate Niche Show, a show that focuses on top real estate professionals who specialize in different niches of real estate. My name is Ben Kogut. Join me as we dive deep into the professional and personal lives of the experts of the real estate industry. Welcome to the Real Estate Niche Show. I'm your host, Ben Kogut, and today I have Matt Fore as a guest. Matt is a part-time real estate investor based out of Nashville, Tennessee. In his professional life, he has spent over a decade in sales and sales leadership positions at one of the largest technology companies in the world. Matt has invested in over 250 units throughout the Southeast in various real estate notes. When he's not working and investing in real estate, he enjoys reading, training for Ironman triathlons, and convincing his brother that he is the favorite twin. I love that. Matt, thank you so much for coming on the show. What did I miss in your bio?
Yeah, nothing in the bio. I'm so happy that you got that last piece, though, because I'm going to point my brother to this and make him listen to it on repeat just so he knows.
That's awesome. Well, let's dive into it, Matt. What is your real estate niche and how did you get into it?
Yeah. So really what I talk to is passive investors who have an active day job. They're trying to grow their career. They like what they're doing, but they know they need some sort of real estate in their portfolio. And I'm just really trying to help them identify the right niches and the right operators to start getting that passive income checks. My passive income journey or my real estate journey, though, began probably about 5 or 6 years ago. And like you mentioned, I had spent over a decade in sales and sales leadership at some of the technology companies. And I was a part of a massive acquisition. I mean, a $10 million net new logo sales campaign. And I saw life-changing commission check, right? And I was looking for ways to invest this money. And I heard everything from Dogecoin to annuities to stocks to real estate. And fortunately, I had a real estate mentor at the time that mentioned real estate to me, told me, hey, you get cash flow, you get some of the appreciation, you get some of the tax benefits. I was sold. I was down this path. And then I got the call from my VP, and it's not the company I work for today. I want to be very clear about that. But it was the week before Christmas, and they said, hey, you're not going to get that commission check. You're only going to get 2 cents on the dollar. And I remember asking him, like, how did we come to this number? What happened here? And he said, Matt, haven't you made enough money this year? And it was at that point that I realized to achieve the goals that I had in my life, I was going to have to find different income streams so that I wasn't tied to just one job and one person making a decision on if I had made enough money that year. So like most of your listeners out there, I got that little purple book by Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which led me to 4-Hour Workweek, which led me to Bigger Pockets, which led me to all these different niches out there. And what I really care about today is really helping people become more intentional with their life by getting passive income streams and freeing themselves from that financial burden.
Love it. Great story. It's sometimes everything happens for a reason. And at that time, I'm sure it didn't feel like that, but look at you now. So congrats on the success that you've had so far. And speaking of that success, I had the honor of participating in your podcast. Maybe, and I know that ties into your overall goals here. Tell us about the podcast and what have you learned along that podcast journey so far?
Yeah, so the podcast is called Ice Cream with Investors. And the real reason for that is the idea came about in 2020. And the world in 2020 just felt very pessimistic today. And I think sometimes we forget that we live in the greatest opportunity time in the world, in history, right? And so I always thought, like, who's mad or frustrated or pessimistic when they're thinking about, talking about, or listening about ice cream? So we call it Ice Cream with Investors. We bring on a lot of folks like yourself from different real estate niches, whether it's mobile home parks, commercial units, multifamily to real estate notes, and really just try to understand like the high level of, do I want to get involved in this niche? And ultimately, I hope our listeners gain some information about, like, is this the right niche for me? Is it active? Is it not? Does it scratch an itch for me or not? And hopefully be able to connect people with interesting people doing interesting things.
Very interesting. And so, as you know, I'm new to the podcasting world. I'm curious, what advice might you have for someone like me who's newer towards being a podcast host?
First of all, if you're listening to this and you don't have a podcast, it is by far the best thing I've ever done. It's gotten me connected with so many different individuals, and I've learned so much. Like, I thought I was a geek because of how much I read and how much I listen to podcasts and things like that. But then when you get an hour dedicated with someone to ask them questions that have been on your mind, you learn so much more. In terms of things that you can learn, I would say batching and getting ahead of schedule is one of the most important things. So I know we're talking today, and I actually have COVID right now. And had I not gotten ahead of my podcasting schedule, I'd be scrambling here at the last minute trying to find podcast guests and things like that. So the more you can get ahead and batch those, whether it's a Friday recording day or you're just going to get a month in advance or whatever it is, the easier your life will become.
Got it. Okay, we're on that. So thanks for that batching tip. And speaking of steps for success, I know that you have formulated 4 steps, and I was wondering if we could dive into those.
Yeah, sure. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm a long distance Ironman triathlete, which means that I do the 2.4 mile swims, the 112 mile bike rides, the 26.2 mile runs. Yes, it's all in a single day. Yes, it's all in a single event. I'm just a glutton for punishment. And one of the things that has really taught me is how to be formulaic in what you're trying to achieve and how to put a plan around it. And really what I've learned is how to bucket that into 4 different things. So that's clarity, consistency, efficiency, and compounding. And if you're okay with it, I'll just go through kind of each one of those and talk through.
Let's hit them.
Cool. So clarity, I think, is the most important thing for me. If you don't know where you're going to go, any road will take you there, right? So I think that in life, we think that our decisions are binary, like they're a yes or a no, a 1 or a 0, a right or a left. And really what we don't realize is that when we make one decision, our decision tree down the line starts to narrow. And our decisions and our options become more limited. So if you don't make that first decision right, your 50th decision, your 100th decision starts to become different because you set yourself on that different path. So I always tell people, like, what would you do if $10 million showed up in your bank account tomorrow? And chances are, if you're listening to this type of content, you wouldn't go to Mexico and just drink pina coladas all day. So get really clear on what it is that you enjoy doing, what your life's purpose is, what your mission is, who the people are that you want to spend your time with, and then start making your decisions around that before you venture down the path. The second thing is consistency. And I believe that consistency will beat talent any day of the week as long as you give it enough time. And Ben, I'm not a huge basketball guy, but I'll give you a basketball analogy. Kobe Bryant, I think we can agree, is one of the greatest of all time. 30,000 points, 18-time All-Star, 15-time All-NBA first team, and most importantly, 5-time NBA championship. He was drafted in 1996, 13th. That same year, Allen Iverson was drafted. He was actually taken number 1. He had just as many points. He had 24,000 points, 11-time All-Star, 7-time All-NBA championship, played a few seasons, fewer seasons than Kobe, but was on the right track. But he never had an NBA title. And the reason why we remember Allen Iverson more than all of that is practice. We talking about practice. If you don't know what I'm talking about, after losing the finals to Kobe Bryant, the next year, Allen Iverson goes on this press conference and just goes on this tangent about, I don't need to practice. I don't need to show up to practice. We're not even talking about a game. We're talking about practice. And you compare that with someone like Kobe Bryant, there's this wonderful picture out there. He's got a broken right hand and he's in the gym with his left hand. A man that said, no matter what, I'm going to get my consistent reps in every day. So for people that are starting out in their real estate journey or wherever they are in their life, I think it's important that you pick one 5-minute task every day that you can be consistent with. And I'll give you some grace here. It doesn't have to be the right thing. It just has to be something that marches you toward that goal when we talked about in the clarity phase. The third is efficiency. So if consistency is about get going and then get good, efficiency is about the good part. Now it's about doing the right part, right thing. So I mentioned that I'm a long distance Ironman triathlete. There are 24 hours in a day. I can't run 25 hours in a day. It is physically impossible. So how can I be more efficient with my workouts? How can I make sure I get strength training in? I get my stretching in. I maybe add some intensity intervals instead of just long runs and things like that. So in finance terms, this could be moving money from your banking account into your savings account, or your savings account into a single family home where you can pull an equity line out. It could be moving your assets into different areas of real estate. It's just being more efficient with what you're already doing. And then the last is, Ben, I'm all ears if you got a great analogy for this, but it's compounding. Sometimes you have to just stop and let your good actions keep working in your favor instead of trying to interrupt them all the time and diverting them away from their end state. So those are kind of how I've framed up what I've learned from Ironman to how it affects also personal life, professional life, and investing in general.
Yeah, I love all that, the consistency, efficiency, and compounding. You asked me how to an analogy for compounding. For me, would be investing. I don't know if it's an analogy, but investing in all these passive commercial real estate deals, such that the cash flow that comes off of those are what you use to invest in other passive deals, and then eventually it becomes this snowball effect that continues to grow and grow and grow. And there really is no limit to how big that could grow. And so that's how I would tie that into what it is that we're doing here with passive investing and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah. And you mentioned one of the golden rules I have for anybody getting involved in investing in real estate for the first time is don't touch the money. Like, don't spend the profits that are coming in, because that first time your investment pays for another investment and you start stacking like that, I mean, it's just a game changer. And it took me 3 or 4 years before I got to that point where, my real estate income was starting to buy other real estate assets. But once it gets to that point, man, life just looks so much different. You can be more intentional with the people that you love and those that you care about the most.
Yeah, I'll build on that a little bit too, Matt. It used to be exciting to take money and spend it on things, cars, whatever. But actually now it's at that point for me, at least personally, that it's even more exciting to be able to put that money to work in what we're talking about in this way. So if you can resist the urge to go and spend that money on material things or whatever it ends up being, and go for that kind of delayed gratification. But what I mean by that is by investing it in things that will eventually start snowballing, like we're talking about, then that it's way more exciting. Way more exciting. So
that's it. And I mean, look, in March of 2020, I saw my equity portfolio take a 30 or 40% dip. And I wouldn't say I wasn't nervous, right? But all around me, I was watching folks lose their job or their spouse lose their job or their hours cut back or things like this. And I was never worried about having a roof over my head and food on my table. And do you know what kind of mental clarity that gives you to stand up for the things that you believe in, to say the things that you want to say in a work environment that you don't disagree with, because you're not afraid of saying the wrong thing to the wrong person and losing your job, or losing your job because some virus comes through the world and all of a sudden 9 million people lose their job in a month, kind of thing. Like, that intentionality you get from having those income streams is just so powerful that I can't stop talking about it and evangelizing it whenever I get the opportunity.
You brought up one more thing, Matt, that I haven't talked about yet on the podcast, that I learned from a mentor of mine. And he told us to build up some fuck you money. And it's not like big mansion kind of material money. Don't misunderstand that. It's, if you are in a job situation where maybe your boss is telling you to go do something that may be unethical or just something you don't want to do, that you will have the income or the base behind you to say, fuck you, I'm out, or this is not for me, or just so that you have that freedom to be able to say, fuck you at any point. And so, I don't know, just something that I wanted to throw out there, kind of building on what you're saying right there. So anyways, let's take this conversation a little bit further. I know you've invested as an LP in a lot of types of deals. What have you invested in? Why? And I know that you also have 3 ways that you like to judge investments. Could you share with us about that?
Yeah, so I am involved in a couple different multifamily passive syndications. We should close on my first co-GP deal by the end of January. So that's depending on when this comes out, maybe I will be able to add that to the stat. And then I've invested in a number of different real estate notes, whether those are hard money loans to fix and flippers or just buying mortgages off of seller finance and things like that. The 3 things I really look at, though, when I'm looking at a passive investment is the team, the geography, and then the overall business structure or plan. So the team is really has this team done a deal before? Have they operated in this market before? If the property needs some sort of rehab, who's the construction agent or the general contractors? Have they done work in this market before? Have they worked with this team before? And I'll give you an example. There was one deal I was looking at where the team was in Kansas, the deal was in Texas, and the general contractor was a business of 2 people in Colorado. Like that just has, I don't know if that's going to work out written all over it. So I'm not saying like if they haven't worked together or if they've not been a part of that market before, it's a hard no, but it's definitely something you should look at. The second is geography. So a good geography will add a tailwind to bad deals all day, any day. What you want to be looking for is income growth, population growth, job growth. And then what I specifically look for is I don't want to be tied to a market where there's only one industry. And that's big Air Force bases, big coal mines, things like that. And then the last is the structure or the business plan. So the structure is really like what type of debt does it have on it? Is it floating? Is it fixed? What's the LTV on the loan? Is it agency debt, non-agency debt? Is it recourse, non-recourse, things like that? And then the business plan. Is this a long-term buy and hold? Is this a new development? Is this a rehab? Is this we're going to run the leases off and raise the rents? So really trying to understand that. So really, I hope with that, the team, the geography, the business plan and structure is that gives people framework for them to start evaluating deals and viewing their deals that are coming across their desk.
I love that, Matt. You've really done a nice job of boiling down what's most important in systematizing your decision-making process. And I'd like to tie that into your 4 steps, including consistency is a huge one. And what I like to encourage people to do as doesn't matter what stage they're at on their investing journey, but I think it's super important to apply a set of kind of like you're saying, these 3 ways to judge investments and do it consistently. And what I mean by that is get on as many GP or sponsor email lists as you can, like myself at HJH Investments. You could, and just start, you may not want to jump into a deal right away, but at least start reviewing them, getting familiar with them. And so that you may start developing certain preferences, you may start seeing certain trends or things like that. And so definitely, playing the long-term game, looking at things as consistently as you possibly can is definitely going to set you up for success in the long run.
Yeah, it's going to sound like a lot, but I tell people they should be running the numbers on 100 deals before they invest in one, just so they can understand, like, if you're going to be in the single family game, for instance, just pick one zip code and run 100 deals. Because at the end of the day, you will know that zip code better than just about anyone else out there. And that's a valuable skill. If it's going to be commercial properties, run 100 commercial properties. Maybe they're with Ben, maybe they're with someone else, but run 100 commercial properties, because the way a commercial property is evaluated is much different than a mobile home, which is much different than a real estate note. And so you'll, like, to your point, you'll start to understand some of the intricacies and the ins and outs. And then the last thing I would say there is, I think it's also important that people understand what they're looking for. Sometimes people throw me deals and they're like, hey, do you think I should invest in this deal? Is it a good deal or not? And I'm like, well, what are you looking for? Right? If you're looking for 100% appreciation in 3 years and no cash flow, that's going to look totally different than somebody looking for a triple net lease on a Starbucks kind of thing over the next 20 years. That they're 2 different goals. So get clear on your philosophy or what you're looking for, and then get consistent in running those numbers so you can start to understand some of the goods and the bads.
I love that. I wrote a little ebook, and one of the topics in there is the 4 rules of cash. And one of the rules of cash, and that I like to follow at least, is that cash now is better than cash later. And so I'm looking for return of capital and return on capital, for that matter, sooner rather than later, so that I can continue to put that money back into other deals and see that kind of cycle through. Not to say that there's nothing wrong with putting in money in a deal and then 2-3 years later getting the money back. That's cool. But again, to your point, knowing what your own personal goals are is super important. And so thanks for making that point.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I love that too, because it reduces your risk. The faster you start getting your capital back, it just reduces your cost basis in something, which reduces your risk. And hey, I'm not saying you'll win every time there, but at least you'll get some of your money back, kind of thing.
Amen to that. Moving forward, we're going to pivot a little bit. I'd love to find out how, either professionally or personally, and I know that you do triathlons, but the question I have is, how do you like to invest in yourself?
Yeah, so there's a couple different things. One, I do the fitness stuff. I'm a big fitness fanatic in terms of just testing myself. I have this phrase, like, I want to test myself mentally, emotionally, and physically and spiritually every single day just to see where my boundaries are. And Ironman is a way to do that physically. Professionally, I also have a coach, which I think is probably the best money I've spent. I love my coach, but the one thing that he gives me more than anything else is just a sense of accountability, knowing that every week I'm going to have to report to him saying that I said I would do this and I did it or I didn't do it. Talk me through why or why not, is huge investment in myself. And then the last is, I'm dyslexic. I grew up dyslexic. I always had difficulty reading. And because of that, I have hundreds and hundreds of books. I've never thrown away a book because they're a little miniature trophy for me. So I'm always a big reader, podcast listener, not so much audiobook listener as much as reader, but just any way I can devour content is what I'm interested in.
Love that. Before I get to the next question, I would like to have a follow-up on that. And do you have any books that you've read recently that you recommend?
That I've read recently.
Or ever, or in anything you'd like to recommend?
Yeah, I'll recommend The Last Lecture. It sits on my desk. Actually, it's right here. And
The Last Lecture. Okay.
Just a quick story on that. It's Randy Posh. He's a professor at Carnegie Mellon, and he's just been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. He's going to die. Basically, that's how the story begins. And he's 35 years old. He has 2 kids and a wife and a tenured professor at Carnegie Mellon. And he basically goes through, but you shouldn't feel sorry for me. These are all the things that I wanted to achieve in my life. I wanted to get out into space and achieve no gravity. I wanted to have a beautiful child. I wanted to teach at I wanted to work at Disney. And he just goes down his list of all the things he achieved in life and what the lessons he learned from it were. And I don't know, it's the number one book I've gifted. It's the book that my mom gave me when I graduated college. So I always try to give it a little plug when I can. And if you're not a reader, go to Randy Posh on YouTube. He's got the actual last lecture that he did at Carnegie Mellon, and it will make you cry. It'll make you laugh. It'll make you inspired.
I recall seeing that a long time ago, and let's be sure to put that in the show notes, y'all. Okay, cool. So moving forward, how do you like to invest in the community?
So my sister had Down syndrome, and she grew up in the 70s. And when she was graduating high school, we thought that there might be ability for her to go live autonomously. So we moved her into a group home type setting. And the organization that ran that is Humankind in Virginia. There's a small nonprofit up there. And my sister tragically passed in 2018 in March. So I try to make sure every year that I donate money with my company match to Humankind every year because I believe in what they're doing. So that's just one way I try to give back.
Got it. Do you happen to know their website?
I think it's humankind.org. I'll get it for you. We can slide it in there.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to get that in the show notes. Awesome. Continuing to move forward, how do you define the word success?
This question makes my heart smile because I love asking people this question because everybody defines success differently. Mine is, if I'm on my deathbed and I define success, it's, did I always set and achieve goals that I thought were outside of my scope of achieving? So if I ever get complacent where I stop setting goals, if I ever get complacent where I stop trying to achieve those goals, then I won't be successful. But as long as I'm continuing to set those goals that are outside of my boundaries and work towards achieving them, then that's how I define success.
Incredible definition. And a follow-up to that, what are your goals right now? Anything that you're willing to share with us?
Yeah, so I want to Boston qualify. So I'm not doing an Ironman this year in hopes of being able to Boston qualify at a race. I've already made the World Championships at Ironman half distance. So getting this one knocked off the belt would be nice. And then there are around podcasting goals. And my goals aren't like, I want this many subscribers or anything like that. It's about how can I set consistency? So I want to publish 20 YouTube videos later this year. I want to make sure I do another 52 podcasts this year. And then we were talking about before that I'm going to do mini episodes on my podcast where I'm answering common questions in a 10-minute format that I'm calling Scoops, Ice Cream with Investors Scoops. I thought that was a pretty good pun. And I'm going to send those off to a ghostwriter to help me write a book. So if I can write a book by the end of the year, qualify for Boston, and achieve the target number of episodes and number of YouTube videos, then I'll consider that a pretty successful year.
I love that, Matt. Well, I'm inspired by all that you're doing. It's absolutely incredible. You should be really proud of what you're up to. And thank you for sharing all this wisdom with my audience. And to that point, if anyone wanted to connect with you, what would be the best ways to do that?
Absolutely. So by the time this airs, we will have the website up and going. So you can go to icecreamwithinvestors.com. Or if you just want to reach out to me directly, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm the Matt Fore with the cheesy smile, based in Nashville, that works at a big technology company. I'm pretty easy to find. The only thing I would say, though, is if you reach out to me on LinkedIn, I love talking about finance and investing and real estate and all the different niches. So I may talk your ear off a bit because I just love nerding out about it. So happy to connect with anybody out there.
Please feel free to reach out to Matt. Let him know that you heard him on the Real Estate Niche Show. And on that note, we're going to wind things down. Are there any other words of wisdom that you'd like to share before we shut it down?
No, I just encourage everyone to continue moving forward right now. We're in a weird time, it seems like, over the past 2 years. But as long as you're listening to content like this, you are the 5 people that you spend the most time with. Then Ben and I are just 2 of those people today. As long as you're listening to content like this, you're going to be in a better spot. So just keep moving forward.
I love that. Yeah, my business partner, Corey Harkleroad, always ends his emails and a lot of ways that he speaks by saying onward. So to that point, onward. And if anybody has any feedback or knows anybody else that you'd like to hear on the show, it's super welcome. And for that matter, thanks again for listening to the Real Estate Niche Show. Until then, onward.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Real Estate Niche Show. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from me or the show, you can follow me on Instagram at Ben Kogut and at The Real Estate Niche Show. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.